in March of 1911, in a famous incident that many of you know, 146 young, female, mostly immigrant workers died at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York. And this event was precipitated by an industry that was highly exploitative, the apparel industry, an industry where powerful garment firms, department stores in this case, contracted out to subcontractors to make clothing very cheaply. And the conditions in these sweatshops were terrible. There was everything from sexual exploitation of workers to very poor pay to workplace safety issues, and the women went on strike in 1909 in what's called the Uprising of the 20,000 in order to improve their lives. And they won a few things, but they lost on workplace safety. Well, 2 years later, the cost of that was clear when 146 of them died. And because it was in downtown New York, on the Lower East Side, famous people saw this happen, right? Wealthy people saw this happen. They literally saw the workers who made their clothes die. And because of that, they finally began to identify with these workers, and they began to fight for accountability in this apparel industry. And so that leads to a series of reforms on workers, on building safety, on fire safety, etc. Okay? And that is kind of a beginning point of a 20th century when Americans said that we want to stand up to the excesses of American capitalism. That these bad old days of corporations being able to do whatever they wanted to do needed to end. And over much of the 20th century, Americans made an enormous impact in taming the excesses of capitalism. And so that leads to all sorts of laws that range from the Social Security Act, to the minimum wage, to the 40-hour week, to high rates of unionization in the mid-20th century. And then after World War II, Americans continue this and begin to say, you know, corporations being able to dump their pollution wherever they want to with no accountability is also a bad thing. And so they begin to demand accountability on this end. So you have a variety of Clean Air Acts, Clean Water Acts, all sorts of environmental legislation that truly clean up the American environment so that we today don't really experience the kinds of environmental impacts our ancestors did, whether here in Brooklyn or in Pittsburgh or anywhere, or, you know, which is famous for its smog, or anywhere around the nation. Okay, and so this is a really successful story, but corporations begin to look for a way out of this. They want to escape these unions, they want to escape these workplace safety regulations, they want to escape these environmental regulations. And from a very early point, even as early as the 1910s, they're kind of starting to begin to do this, with some companies beginning to move to the South, where you don't have the same level of workplace regulations, particularly in this apparel industry, right? But beginning in the 1960s, you really begin to see companies start moving their factories overseas in order to escape these regulations, because what corporations want is to repeat the highly exploitative nature of production overseas. They were never accepted the existence of unions. They never accepted the existence of these laws. And so they began to move overseas, first to Mexico in the 60s, and then beginning to move to places like Korea and Taiwan, then to China, and eventually in the modern, in the 21st century, to Central America and to poor countries in South and Southeast Asia. Well, that brings us to the end of our story. In 2013, over 1,100 workers died at the Rana Plaza in Savar, Bangladesh. And the story is almost exactly the same as the Triangle Fire. Young women working in the apparel industry with powerful department stores like Walmart, putting high cost pressures on the local contractors to make sure that the goods stay cheap and that profit for Walmart stays high, unsafe working conditions, the factory collapses on them. It's probably the greatest single workplace disaster in industrial history, and it's almost the exact same thing as 1911, except we don't see it. Americans don't see it. We can't even find Bangladesh on a map. Forget about seeing the workers die and working to improve those conditions. What's happened is that corporations have escaped the legal codes that tame them. We are still bound by them here in the United States, or in Bangladesh, or in Honduras, or in Mexico. But if the corporation says that's too stringently applied, this raises too much, that pollution regulation is too strong, they're going to move to another country. And in doing that, we've created a globalized system of exploitation that allows these companies to create tremendous amounts of profit while undermining workers around the world.